I'm John Batchelor. Mary Kissel, my colleague, co-host. She is also the host of her own show, WSJ.com's Opinion Journal, each day at 1 p.m. for the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. 4:30 in the morning, Los Angeles. I believe it is North Highland Avenue. This is a part of Los Angeles, nice shops, nice stores, intersections, all squares with gasoline stations at the big intersections, and a North Highland Avenue is lined with what looks to be old palm growth. A speeding vehicle, a Mercedes, late model. At the wheel, Michael Hastings, 33 years old, now deceased. He died sometime after a dash cam watches this car speed through an intersection, what appears to be a red light. You can see the green light and the red light clearly, so he's running a red light. Jeff Bliss, the Bliss Index, joins us. Quickly, Jeff, the reason this dash cam is helpful is because there are unwise things being said about Mr. Hastings and what he was working on the last days, whether anybody was watching him, whether he felt persecuted in some fashion. Right now, the coroner, I believe, has identified his body. It was burned very badly. You can see on the dash cam as the car approaches that the flames are intense. There's water being poured on. Right now, what is the best explanation for Mr. Hastings' death? Why did he go off the road, Jeff? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John Mary. Yes, it appears that this is one of those accidents that occurs when you're traveling at a very high rate of speed. It doesn't take much to, when you cross the median, to run into something. You know, traveling at that rate of speed, it doesn't take much. A small tip of the wheel can cause you to go quite a distance in one direction before you can correct. In his case, it appears it was in the palm tree there.
Now, Michael Hastings, 33, he was a young man, but he had already accomplished some major things in his profession of journalism. Most notable for his 2010 Rolling Stone profile of General Stanley McChrystal. Jeff, did he do the country a service there by exposing a general who, shall we say, liked to run off his mouth, or did he take down someone who was just sort of speaking the usual military speak, and we did lose an important guiding presence there in a country that needed it?
Well, I think it would be rare to find a group of military officers that doesn't have something to say about their commander-in-chief. But in his case, he just reported what was being said, and President Obama did something that maybe you could say Truman did the same thing with Douglas MacArthur, and that you have to show where the authority lies, and it lies with the civilian commander-in-chief.
Jeff, detail about the dash cam, because you sent me the video. You can find it on YouTube right now. Who was driving that car? Who is the dash cam?
Well, it appears the dash cam belongs to a freelancer out here in Los Angeles. And those guys they're all over the place. They do everything from the paparazzi type work that captures the celebrities coming in and out of clubs to going after accidents. You know, the economy's hit the news gathering business, including TV news, very hard. So what happens is they look to these freelancers to supply them with video and audio all the time that they run as exclusives and otherwise on their stations.
I understand the FBI has commented on Mr. Hastings' death. What have they said, Jeff?
That's right. There's been a lot of talk about conspiracies. Was his new article he was working on about Jill Kelly or the CIA, did that result in his demise? And the FBI said, you know what? There's no investigation on our side. This was a traffic accident, plain and simple, and the Los Angeles Police Department says that's what it is, good enough for us.
Jeff Bliss of the Bliss Index. Michael Hastings, R.I.P. at 33 years old. Mary, Mount Holly versus Mount Holly Garden citizens in action. This is early. It's a Supreme Court case. It'll be argued, oral arguments, I believe, later this year. This is about disparate impact. I happen to know that you work a lot on this at the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal.
I do, for my sins.
What is disparate impact liability claims? What is that, the heart of this case that will be argued?
Disparate impact is a theory that you can prove discrimination, and I put that in scare quotes, prove, through statistics. In other words, that you can have no intent to discriminate whatsoever, but if the result of your action results in some sort of quota, and the government is the one that sets that quota, then you can be sued for discriminating. And Mount Holly is a case in point. The city wanted to declare blighted a very troubled public housing project that was populated mostly by minorities. In fact, they were trying to help these renters who were unfortunately subjects of crime, victims living in these terrible conditions, violations of the housing code. And over a period of years, a couple of renters sued and said, well, if you do this, you're discriminating against us because the majority of the residents are non-white residents. And so the Supreme Court is going to take this up. But, John, this is a very important case because the Supreme Court was going to decide the very same issue last year.
Magner versus Gallagher?
Magner versus Gallagher, when the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, a man we have talked about before on this show,
Mr. Perez.
Tom Perez, who's now nominated for Labor Secretary.
No vote yet.
No vote yet. Well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
He intervened and he got that case withdrawn.
But this is the same
Same issue. Same issue.
And the Supreme Court is, I'm told, eager to debate this.
Well, look, the law needs to be clarified because Tom Perez and the administration have gone to big banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America and to smaller banks like Citizens in the Midwest and said, pay up, because there's really no way to defend against this charge. And so these banks don't want to be labeled as racist, so they've coughed up money at the cost of their shareholders, and the Justice Department has distributed it to groups that they want to distribute that money to. So, banks would want this clarified. Mr. Perez does not, but the Supreme Court hopefully is going to come down with a definitive ruling.
I note, Mary, that there's a nexus here. It has Kissel's name all over it because disparate impact is useful for the CFPB. I believe that we've had remarks about that in the past. Mr. Cordray, he wants to use it, I learn here, for auto lenders. So this is a multi-purpose weapon. This is kind of like one of those tools that you have in your belt that can open a can or launch a nuclear weapon. It can go in any direction.
Oh, it's absolutely a cancer. It's not just the Consumer Bureau looking at banks for this issue or the Department of Justice extorting money out of banks for this issue. It's also the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a smaller EEOC agency that really people don't pay much attention to. They've decided to outlaw criminal background checks and hiring because they say, the vast disproportionate majority of the criminals, people who have been convicted of crimes, unfortunately, are non-white. And so if you screen for that, you're racist. It's incredible, John.
Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and the host of Opinion Journal, each day at WSJ.com at 1 p.m. Mount Holly versus Mount Holly Garden Citizens in Action. Mount Holly is a town in New Jersey. The arguments before the Supreme Court later this year. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, John.
I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.